And we're back. Max, let's go through that combat corner, shall we?
Yeah, no fight review or preview for this week, just some news to cover. And unfortunately, the biggest piece of news to cover is a negative one. So the fight in 2020 that I was most excited to see and tell you about was Khamzat Chimaev versus Leon Edwards. There's a ton of reasons this fight is super compelling, and I've had a script going on in my head for weeks now, getting ready to tell you about this. But unfortunately, Leon Edwards came down with a case of the Rona, and it's a bad case of the Rona. I think he's lost 4 pounds of weight. He's had some flu-like symptoms, so the man is not going to be in prime fighting condition December 19th. It really sucks. This was an awesome fight that I was super excited for. It is now not going to happen on December 19th. The plan, as far as I'm aware, is still to rebook it, which is kind of lucky for Leon because I could have totally seen the UFC just giving Khamzat a different opponent and moving on. I just wanted to end talking about this by reading what Leon Edwards said because he doesn't tweet too often. So when people are like that, when they do tweet, I like to listen to it. Here's what he said. Another setback, but when you come from the mud, you learn to put everything in perspective. This virus has affected many lives and families, much worse than mine. Looking forward to getting this rebooked soon. Thank you for all the well wishes. So Leon said it's not 100% not his fault, but he's had a lot of bad luck not go in his way. He's had a ton of hurdles to overcome and finally seemed like he might have a chance to clear it, and another hurdle's been put in his way. He's staying optimistic. He's staying grounded. I'd like to see it. Best wishes to Leon Edwards, and I hope to see that fight as soon as it's optimal to be made for both fighters.
Yeah, when do you think that would be? Because what I've experienced so far in a lot of these pro leagues is if someone has a pretty severe case of COVID, it takes a really long time for them to come back. So what do you think would be the timeline? And then in that case, Leon Edwards, he may not have fought in a year by the time this fight gets rescheduled.
Well, he's actually already not fought in a year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Cody Garbrandt was supposed to fight for the flyweight title in November. And I believe in late September, he got COVID and postponed it. And now he's having a ton of health complications like blood clots. There was a muscle tear. And so first, you don't really know what's going to happen to Edwards. You just kind of cross your fingers and hope he's just going to move on and be fine with no lingering side effects. But it doesn't seem like you can completely count that out. Then the second question is, what does his opponent do? Because you don't want to stay in fight camp for too long. It increases risk of injury. The wear and tear on the muscles is greater, but you don't want to just wholesale stop. So they're going to have to negotiate and figure it out. And I don't know if that negotiation can even take place until we know what the picture for Leon Edwards looks like. And I don't know what Khamzat does in the meanwhile. So a lot of questions, not a lot of clear answers. And yeah, I mean, it's great that the UFC has been able to operate during COVID, but we've had a lot of fights get scrapped because of it. So they like to talk about how they've overcome it, and they have, and it's a huge accomplishment, but it's certainly got its licks in on the sport, like every other sport.
Just a reminder for y'all that this thing is still out there and it's not going away, and you got to be careful, wear your mask, take your precautions. If these super athletes who rely on their ability to perform to make money are still getting it, then, and it affects them, then it can affect all of us, right? Okay, sorry. My rant is done. Continue, please. Tell me what else is going on.
Well said, buddy. Luckily, the rest of the news I cover is positive. So first, I talked Monday about the Vettori versus Hermanson card, or at least a couple of the fights on it. I did not mention the Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia boxing pay-per-view that's also taking place tomorrow night. And That's because I've seen neither guy fight ever, so I don't feel comfortable breaking it down, but I do want to give a little preview of why I'm going to be watching it. And that's essentially going to be looking for a mega fight. So last month, I got to see Terence Crawford for the second or third time, who's probably become my favorite boxer, if not one of my favorites. You'd love him. He's a beautiful switch hitter. It's great. But the problem plaguing Terence Crawford is he can't find solid opponents due to the way the boxing leagues are set up. And the best opponent in the world, other than for Terence Crawford, seems to be Errol Spence Jr. But this man was in a car crash over a year ago, I believe. He easily could have died in it. He didn't. He seems to have recovered to the point where he's comfortable stepping into the ring again. And he's going to do that tomorrow night against a guy I don't really know much about, but I know he's an elite fighter with close fights over some of the other top fighters in the world, Keith Thurman and Sean Porter Jr. So tomorrow night, I'm going to be watching Errol Spence Jr. to see what he looks like and to figure out how badly do I want to see Terence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. I'm hoping Spence comes out, performs as well, if not better than he has in the past, because if both fighters really want to make that fight happen, it will happen. ESPN and PBC, the companies each is affiliated with, made Fury Wilder happen within the last year. So it's absolutely possible. And I'm going to be watching that fight with that in mind. The next piece will stick with boxing. Quick talk about Snoop Dogg's Fight Club. So last episode, I talked about how much I enjoyed having Snoop Dogg be a part of the Tyson versus Jones spectacle, and a lot of other people felt the same way, because Snoop Dogg is starting a fight club with Triller, the same media entertainment company that was affiliated with the last event. So I got really excited when this was announced because I thought it would be connected to Mike Tyson and the Legends League. It turns out that's not the case. It's going to be essentially the fights Snoop Dogg can put on, it sounds like. So that was a big disappointment to me when I read that, but I like a lot of it. It's going to be 5 to 8 events per year, they said. It's a pretty loose description. They want to make some real boxing matches. They want to make some fun celebrity boxing matches. So I don't think this is going to be anything close to a marquee league. I'm pretty disappointed they can't combine it with Tyson's Legends League, because I think there would be potential for that to become that sort of marquee thing I was hoping to see. But as long as they respect each other, steer clear, and don't get too aggressive with their copyright and signings, I think there's probably space for both to operate. Any thoughts on that?
I like that it can be that they've kind of found a place where they can be the ones hosting this like celebrity championship essentially. So right now you have Jake Paul is whatever, and he's only fought whatever 2 bums, but he's got the celebrity belt, right? And he's taking all challengers. And this is kind of the platform where they can run that. And I don't think we saw all this news with Evander Kane. I don't think he's going to invite Evander Kane because of all the logistical issues that Kane will have to go through to get out of like the NHL. And it's really tough timing when he's a pro athlete and has to be and is under contract. So I don't think it'll happen, but it's purely entertainment. Again, I don't think that neither of us think that highly of the Paul brothers, but this would be a place that would draw views and draw buys if they can get this kind of celebrity championship on the Fight Club and have him take all comers. And it would be nice to see him get knocked out and then have that kind of celebrity belt move on, and anyone really can take their shot at it.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of that, because they're not real professionals. You don't have to have it like pegged at a specific weight, and it can be more of a catch weight belt within, like, I don't know, a 170 to 195. So that leaves a lot of space. I think I'd want to see guys taking it seriously enough where they've got like at least a year of training and they've got like some real boxing minds in their corner. But there's fun in that looseness. If I'm the NHL, I kind of want to let Evander Kane get in there. Like, I didn't like it at first. I'm kind of rattled. Sportsnet seems to be plugging the hell out of this. They keep posting clips of like Logan Paul talking shit, Evander Kane talking shit. But I don't know. You can tell me what you think on this, but I think if you had to pick any sport to transition into boxing, it would absolutely be hockey for two reasons primarily. First, boxing, Teddy Atlas, I was just listening to him. He likes to say boxing is 75% mentality. So hockey, I think, is really well suited for to transition into a boxing mentality because it's a lot more ongoing. Like with football and NBA, you're getting so many whistles, so many breaks. You have like a bad 3 minute, 2 minute run. Your coach has like 7 timeouts to call to give you guys a break. You don't like the way the play is going, you can get a whistle pretty easily. Foul shots really give you a chance to get a break. NFL, obviously very high level athletes, but very much a burst sport. Plenty of time to reset and refresh most of the time. Hockey, not so much. The only time you're really getting breaks in hockey is if you're going to be constantly icing the puck for a whistle. And even that's, I kind of think of it as the same way in boxing. If you're getting hammered, you can clinch the guy, you can try and hold on to him for dear life. But if you keep doing that, it's not going to work out. And icing the puck in hockey is kind of similar. So I think that the physicality of hockey, the grind and grit of it, the way the play just keeps going on, makes it a really well-suited mentality to transition. Physically, obviously, there's different stuff to learn. Apparently, Evander Kane has some boxing experience, but I don't know. I mean, the NHL is by far the least appreciated of the major sports, especially in the US. So I feel like there's a chance for the NFL to get some, or NHL, excuse me, to get some promotion in by letting this happen. And I'd kind of like to see it against my own better judgment.
Yeah, the NHL players, they know how to take a hit, right? They know how to take a punch. They've grown up in this environment where, well, it's less so now that some of these leagues are starting to ban fighting, but you grew up and it was, even if you were the most skilled, if you had like the nastiest hands on the team, you still at some point had to fight someone.
Yeah.
And it could have been the other team's most daintiest player, but it's still a fight, right? And the NHL don't really, the only sport where you have this part of the game where two guys can literally just swing at each other and not go to jail. So again, I agree with you. If there's ever one sport that could kind of throw its players into boxing, it'd be the NHL, because Evander Kane could probably take a couple punches and give a couple back, and might go longer than 20 seconds of Nate Robinson getting slumped, but it might be fun to see. I mean, the thing for me is I don't think the NHL lets it happen unless they're sure they can get something out of it in terms of marketing exposure. The only reason I think Evander Kane would do it is, say Triller offered him $3 million, and that's when he can say, okay, I'm going to step out of my contract and do this. But I don't think he's going to make that kind of money because, like you said, the NHL is underappreciated in the US.
Yeah. I mean, the toughest part, and the reason if I'm the San Jose Sharks, I don't let this go through, is there's a better than not chance Kane walks out of that with a concussion. So I I'd love to see it. I think there's some ways in which it makes sense. It can hype the NHL's brand, hype hockey as a sport, but it certainly would take a toll on Kane. And as the owner of the Sharks, I would certainly not be willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
The last thing I'm going to talk about, I don't know if you heard anything on this, but Claressa Shields, a 2-time gold medal boxing Olympian and as far as I can tell, the most dominant female in boxing history, has signed with the Pro Fight League MMA organization. You hear anything about this?
No, I haven't, surprisingly, but my first take would be she's going to get her ass kicked by someone who knows how to take it to the ground.
Yeah. So that's luckily Clarissa's also aware of that fact. So let me tell you a bit about Pro Fight League first. It has 6 divisions where there's a regular season. I believe fighters have 2 fights that will be scored based on points on if they win and how they win. The top 8 or top 4 fighters in a division then move on to a playoff bracket where they'll have 2 fights in a night, and then the winner of that will compete in a championship, and the champion gets $1 million. And it's a regular season format, so this happens every year in theory, although it's a very new organization.
Wait, I'm stuck on 2 fights in a night?
Yeah, so
Is that possible?
yeah, they do it.
Oh my God.
There's, I mean, that's how the UFC started. It was a one-night tournament.
But so they fight more than once in one night. Sorry,
just just on one night in the year, but yeah.
okay, I can't get past that though. That seems ridiculous, especially if you get like your arm broke or something.
You get your arm broke, you're not getting back in the cage that night. But I don't quite understand. I haven't watched it before. This kind of drew my eye to it. I'll certainly have my eye on it for this next coming season. I know there is some, like, obviously they have to medically clear you to get back in the cage, and I don't know to what the threshold of damage they'll allow you to take before letting you get back in the cage. It is balanced by the fact that your opponent also gets into a fight. It's certainly interesting. So what I was going to say is 5 of those PFL divisions are men's and 1 is women's, and it's a 155 pound women's division. The reason it's 155 pounds is because of, you could arguably say, their biggest marquee signing, Kayla Harrison, who is also a 2-time World Olympic gold medalist, except in judoka, not boxing. So they signed her, and she said, I want it to be 155 pounds, not 145 pounds. She took 1 year to learn MMA. She'd already been training MMA, but after she signed, she competed in the last year tournament, and she won. So that's what Claressa Shields is going to be stepping into. She has a lot to learn, but what I like the most is she's 25 years old. So at 25 years old, to have won 2 gold medals and have a 10-0 record and have taken pretty much every belt you could hope to take, there's a lot to like about that for someone to step into MMA. She's not saying she intends to win that $1 million belt this coming season, but she's hoping to next season. So she's got a lot of work to do for sure, but I'm certainly going to have my eye on it and be curious to see, because for women's MMA, when you're talking about the big girls, 145, 155, I can list all the names that come to mind pretty quickly. Number 1 fighter in the world right now, obviously Amanda Nunes, 145, absolutely dominant. Number 2 fighter, Chris Cyborg, currently signed with Bellator. Next, for me, it's a toss-up between Felicia Spencer, who's with the MMA UFC and has lost to both Nunes and Cyborg very decisively, and Kayla Harrison, who has been very much dominant, but not against any real names. Then you've got Megan Anderson, who's with the UFC, and they're trying to schedule her against Nunes. And lastly, I'll give a shout out to Julia Budd, the former Bellator 145 champion. So I guess Claressa has said on record she doesn't think she can make 145. So 155 PFL makes sense for her. But Kayla, who wanted the 155 division in the first place, his last fight was with a UFC affiliated women's MMA league at 145. So I guess the picture I'm trying to set up here is Claressa can spend 1 year, 2 years, learn MMA. She's a high functioning, very competent athlete, and there's not a very deep division for her to go through. So I think it's realistic to say in a year and a half, she can beat most of the women at 155 in the world. And then it gets interesting with her, because all those women I mentioned, bar Amanda Nunes, you could see being interested in moving up to 155 or maybe making a catch weight at 150, 152. So it's one more name in a very thin division, and it's got my eye on it. I'll be excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, wow. That is definitely going to be interesting to have possibly two gold medalists going at it in a regular season type fighting league.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to. If I'm PFL, what I want to happen is Claressa spends the next year working on her MMA. Somehow you get Kayla to not compete in the tournament the year after. Claressa competes, wins it. We know she's saying for real is kind of a stretch because she wouldn't be putting a win over anyone that's super impressive the way a win over, say, Julia Budd or Megan Anderson would be. But still, it shows she's trained her MMA. Then you have your regular season, you put them on opposite sides of the playoff bracket, and then in, I guess, 2.5 years, you have them compete in the finals.
All right. We're going to jump into some NBA talk, but first, we'll take a quick break.